the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. That's infinitely true. I might say like 100%, cent percent, but actually it's infinitely true. So many other things are true, and like interdependently, like these reeds, everything has some kind of truth or meaning or value or but ultimately the infinite is the case. That is truly ultimate reality, okay? What that is something that needs to be revealed, okay? There's a lot of work that has to be done individually for one to really come to that, for oneself to understand why and how that is. But I'm gonna share the fruits of my research in these videos, and this is the first one. So let's just begin at a sort of beginning. And fortunately, for what I have to convey, there is a beginning point. That's not the same thing as ultimate reality. This is something I've already said, right? That the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. But I've thought a lot about this over the decades of my obsessing on this one point. And here it is. So the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. And the infinitesimal point, this point I've been referring to, and the point of everything, really, this is the opposite of the absolute infinite, okay? So there's infinity, that's ultimate reality, and then this point is penultimate reality. It's the beginning and end. It's also the sustaining central point of organization of every possible thing, every form, and every frame of reference is held open by the being, the standing, the presence of this point, the holding of this point. So this point is radical, so radical, there's only one such entity. This is being, okay? So the absolute infinite ultimate reality, that is beyond being. You could say, in a sense, that it's like the ultimate being, the supreme being, but its beingness explodes. That is its nature. That is what the infinite is. It's both explosive and implosive, infinitely, right? I mean, these kinds of things we're familiar with infinity, because we're familiar with the tangible infinite, right? The countably infinite, the qualifiably infinite, the conceivably infinite. And that is not what we're talking about when we refer to the absolute infinite. It is beyond all of that. Georg Cantor went nuts with this stuff towards the end of his life. Unfortunately, he was unable to integrate the astounding power that this ultimate reality is. So it is a very powerful idea, as any propositions of foundation are. But so what I am doing is I've figured out, when I was a teenager, I figured out the way it works between these relational concepts is this. There is this void of pure and radical nothingness. And it's hard to imagine such a thing as being absolutely everything, but it is. When you expand your consciousness all the way so that there's nothing left, you have this breakthrough experience, and all that remains is the stunning, wondrous glory, the amazement of the fact that absolutely everything is the same thing as pure and radical nothingness. And that it's always there. There's no escaping it. It's totally inevitable. And the reverse, the reciprocal of that, which is this camera on a tripod, this human with a voice, these reeds, this lake, this place, this is all also nothing. This is also the absolute infinite ultimate reality. Okay, so consider this. The phrase, the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. That is a proposition, a statement, a complete sentence. Capital letter, period. But it's also a saying, a statement, a kind of logo, right? Like a Mahavakya, a great saying. the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. Or you can call it one thing, right? The absolute infinite ultimate reality. So these are supposed to be like a meme, something that you use to remember this fact, the fact of the proposition. Because that's what I'm saying, right? The absolute infinite is ultimate reality. So put that over here and realize that there's this special point that is taken absolutely in reference to this. This point, this infinitesimal point, is the reciprocal of that. So while this is infinity, right, the lemniscate symbol for infinity, perhaps with absolute value signs, and that's the absolute infinite, and that's absolutely everything, and it's also this infinitesimal point. This infinitesimal point, nonetheless, can be distinguished from that. And in fact, this is the first and only distinction. So in a way, this point is not only simple, it's ultra simple, and thereby it's maybe a little bit complicated in the sense that one needs to understand just how radical this point is. This is unity over infinity, okay? Like the numeral 1 over infinity. That's the infinitesimal. Okay, so these are respectively ultimate reality, the absolute infinite is ultimate reality, and this infinitesimal point is penultimate reality. It's adjacent to it. It's the most proximate thing to the absolute infinite. And therefore, it's the one thing also that the infinite employs, you could say. You could kind of personify the absolute infinite and call it God, you know, and what it uses is this infinitesimal point as its instrument of creation. And really, ultimately, what this infinitesimal point is an instrument of surrender. Because it is through this point that not only all things come to be, but also the infinite has any being and comes to be in any way at all. So this is a very special concept. And that's really what I want to make the main point. But before I go into this even more, which is what this whole game is, this whole series of videos, this whole purpose of my life is to express the point and to reveal the nature of the absolute infinite and the infinitesimal penultimate reality and ultimate reality and their relationship. There's also this third thing, and that's the relationship between these two. So I'll place that over here, right? And this is called, we'll give it a fancy word. The idea with these fancy words is that no one else will use them. I mean, hopefully people will, but, you know, so anti-penultimate reality, anti like the French antebellum, you know, like after the war, right? So after all that stuff, the next stuff, so the category of all things that come about, creation, destruction, form, all of forms, you know, all things, everything, all this, everything we're doing right now and everything more, all that stuff comes about as anti-penultimate reality, a kind of third thing. So there's ultimate reality, penultimate reality, and anti-penultimate reality. So these gestures I'm doing with my hands indicate that indeed this can be diagrammed pretty well. And like on my website and elsewhere, I've made like a grand diagram, but it's so grand that it's so simple that we can carry it right here. We don't even need it. I didn't bring a chalkboard because it's not necessary. All it is a circle and a point. So here's how it works, okay? All of these things I've been saying will come all together in like one image that I hope you will catch. That's mainly what I want to get across is this image, right? Because I can express this all in words, but a picture says 1,000 words. Okay, so here it is. The absolute infinite is ultimate reality. The infinitesimal is penultimate reality, and that's this one point at the center of this diagram. Anti-penultimate reality, the relationship between these two, is the field of absolute relativity. Because what these entities are the absolute infinite, the infinitesimal point, and their field, the frame of reference, the frame that opens by distinguishing this point from the absolute infinite. So this is diagrammed as a circle with a center point. And then we can label the periphery or the circumference as being different from this infinitesimal point. And then we can put other concentric circles in here and designate what they are, which is exciting stuff. This is like the deepest metaphysics, okay? But let me make these a bit more palatable still. Okay, so the absolute infinite, which is ultimate reality, is not only out here or on this side, but it's everything, right? So it's kind of chaotic. It's actually totally primordial chaos, except that it's the most beautiful, wonderful thing. So it's the most super symmetrical, amazing, astounding astonishment. That's ultimate reality. So it's not usually how we think of chaos, right? But it is. It's chaos. But because there is this point, because a point can be posited at all, this chaos becomes a perfect sphere, an n-dimensional or infinite-dimensional infinite sphere. And this is an ancient Hermetic concept that has been employed throughout the history of philosophical ideas here and there. It's got some currency. The infinite sphere is what the absolute infinite, ultimate reality, becomes once there is this point. Because this point is also the center of all centers, the center of all possible centers, the centerless center, the center that doesn't go anywhere, the absolute necessity and inevitability of a center point, of a point of reference in all this chaos. That's what causes the absolute infinite and its overwhelming, infinitely many possibilities to become real, to become ultimate reality, and to become a sphere, the infinite sphere in relation to this point. So the very positing of the point is what makes that thing into a sphere. Okay? So these things are well organized. These most primordial, most foundational things. And this is the deepest thing. This is the highest doctrine, the deepest truth. And this is where one goes at the culmination of all of their spiritual work, at least at this point. Of course, since the absolute infinite is ultimate reality, it's also kind of, in a weird way, allowed to continue in all possible directions with everything that ever is. So everything that's happening now, it will continue forever and amplify infinitely, in infinitely many possible universes, different versions of what's happening here, infinitely many of them, and all sorts of other things. Absolutely everything has its infinite side. Everything has its self-reference, its self-referential side, its being itself, and that is what sucks all its reference in like a black hole to this singularity, and ultimately to the center of all possible centers, and that's ultimately the same thing as me and everything, right? This pure self-reference, pure subjectivity, pure infinitesimal penultimate reality. That's the self. And that's the same thing as being. So what's this other thing? The absolute infinite. That's God. Not like any of the ideas of God that we've ever had, but the kind of idea of God that is the reality of this bottomless absolute infinity that nonetheless, here we are. So this infinitesimal point, which is the center of all centers, the center of everything, it's centered right here. Because how many of these points are there? One. There's only one. It's the one and only capital O1 infinitesimal point, the true infinitesimal. Okay? Similarly, the infinite that we're referring to, the absolute infinite, that's the true infinite, not the infinitum secundum quid, or the that which is infinite in certain properties, in certain respects only, like the infinity of the number line. Those are ways of understanding like what it is, that work in certain contexts that have developed, and that's good. But what we want to do is we want to blast through all preconceived ideas to get to the ultimate thing, which isn't just nothingness. Everything isn't just relative, okay? Like, this isn't about how nothingness is ultimate reality and therefore everything is subjective and everything goes. Not really, no. The way it works is because the ultimate reality is a very special kind of nothingness that we don't have access to ordinarily. That is, not in this order, right? But in the infinite order, which, guess where that is? It's right here. Every order sits in, rests upon, in and out, on and under, whatever. The infinite of order. And that's what we're referring to. This is the transcendental organizing point of all possible realities, of all possible organizations, of all possible forms. And what it is this infinitesimal point is also called the first distinction. And so this word, this phrase, the first distinction, gives us a little bit of interesting context that'll help, I think, explain where this is coming from and maybe a bit how it works in terms of form and such as well. This is maybe like another video, maybe like a side topic to really delve into, but just as a reference real quick, the term, the first distinction, although you can find similar terms throughout the history of philosophical ideas, it really comes from George Spencer Brown's Laws of Form, a 1969 book by a really interesting mathematician and philosopher who was very influential in a number of important scientific contexts. But the one that I got really into was the way John Lilly, the inventor of the float tank, was using laws of form in the float tank in the 1970s and 80s. And that's been my mission for some years, to like bring back John Lilly's use of laws of form in the flotation tank. You know, for this purpose of a first-person science of consciousness, so I could have the best platform or framework within which to delve into this ultimate, foundational, fundamental metaphysical research, you know. So there's much more to be said about laws of form. But anyway, the first distinction is the center of all centers. This is not something that comes out of laws of form. This is something that I've found similar to the idea of the first distinction in laws of form, but it was actually another 15 years after that I discovered that center point is the center of the infinite sphere. Okay, then that's another video, another tangent that comes from Peter Manchester, one of my professors out here at Stony Brook University. So Peter Manchester passed away in 2015. George Spencer Brown passed away in 2016. These guys were my friends and mentors, but they were working on this, you could say, the highest work, the great work, the magnum opus, a sort of like, you could give it like an alchemical context, but it's different than what other philosophers are doing, even when they're working on metaphysical foundations, a la Heidegger or Levinas or, you know, things like this. So, fundamentally, this system of the infinitesimal point, this diagram of this center point and the circumference or the periphery, this has maybe haunted metaphysics here and there. Maybe it's come to the level of expression in different languages and different eras and hasn't quite made it all the way to the specific consciousness that we have today. You know, in English, in the sorts of bite-sized concepts that we digest through books and media. No, this is something that is available to all consciousness possible ever. So, I mean, there's lots of weird forms of life out there, even just on this planet. And then if you consider that there are infinitely many possible universes, this covers all possible things. So there is such a thing in Western metaphysics today as the ontology of absolutely everything. And that's what I specialize in. That's what I work on within ontological phenomenology. And that's the work of Hedvig Conrad Martius. Specifically, she calls this Universal Ontology, the culmination of the ontology of reality, or real ontology. Okay, but that's like another tangent, another whole video series that can be done on this. So the third thing is maybe where I'll wrap up what I've been saying a bit here. So there's three things I really want to get across, and it's really just a way of framing, of packaging, and transmitting the point, this center point, this ultimate, or rather penultimate thing. So here's the third bit of the sandwich. So the first slice of bread is that the absolute infinite is ultimate reality, and then the contents of this sandwich is this infinitesimal point, that this is penultimate reality. This is the spirit. So this is God, and this is the spirit, or the self. This is what the idea of the ego in all of its different forms ultimately comes down to, and it's what, when you take it away, it reveals God's self, the Godhead. So these two things, that's already very powerful enough, to explain these two things and their relationship is exactly what we're doing here today. So their relationship is a third thing. Okay, we're calling it anti-penultimate reality. So ultimate reality, penultimate reality, and anti-penultimate reality. So if we picture our diagram, right, then we can draw lines, infinitely many lines, radial lines moving from the center to the periphery, or from the periphery to the center, or both. And these motions of central dynamisms or peripheral dynamisms, these are anti-penultimate reality. But guess what? They cover absolutely everything possible. And what they are, what these extensions are, these are just reflections. These are just extensions of that infinitesimal first distinction, the penultimate reality, the center point, which, of course, is just the point of the infinite. So if the infinite could have a point, it would be this. And if it could do anything, and it can, and it does everything that there ever is, boom. That's what all this is. So it's kind of like the Big Bang, but it's also like the Big Bang, the Big Crunch, and it's kind of like the singularity of a black hole, except that we're always inside this event horizon. So these are like ideas like the black hole or the cosmological Big Bang, these are concepts that I use in my class. When I try to teach the students the point, I use these images, right? I'll use the clip from 2001: A Space Odyssey, or the clip at the the big psychedelic point of these movies, or in Interstellar, right? When they go into the black hole, like these kinds of things do animate our scientific imagination, or our sci-fi imaginary, So it's somewhat understandable, even though it's pretty whacked out. But the third thing isn't just these protos and epistrophe, this emanation and return, from this center point to the periphery or vice versa. It's not just that. Like, that's cool, and I'm working with that a lot in my thought, in my dissertation, in my planned books and everything. But recently, it's occurred to me that this third thing is exactly this. And what this is the ultimate reality show. So this is a concept, the ultimate reality show. This is art. It's conceptual art. but it's also potentially something that can be syndicated, maybe a movie, and etc. But the point is that a showing or a revelation might also ultimately refer to the ultimate revelation, the revelation of ultimate reality, which is what this center point does all along, even in its action of creation as the absolute infinite ultimate reality, the only thing that ultimately there is, a thing which is no thing. Through this power of the spirit, the highest spirit, pure subjectivity, pure self-reference, being itself, the self, being, this thing, this infinitesimal point of which there's only one, it uses this to create all things and all time and all space, all existence, all of this. Okay, so this is all being revealed. This is all a show that we're used to. We think this is normal. This is in the ordinary order, right? And that's fine. You know, we can have our latent profundity about all this so that we can operate as if it's mundane, as if it's fucking stupid at times, as if it sucks or whatever, you know, or if it's beautiful but it's not the ultimate beauty or whatever it is. But the reverse is that this infinitesimal point is the barrier for us on this side, you know, amongst all things, to penetrate through to ultimate reality. Because ultimate reality is absolutely available. It's here. Ultimate reality, God, is love. The spirit, life. Okay? This being, self, life, these are all synonyms. This is penultimate reality. So love and life. These are ultimate and penultimate reality. And this third thing is all this. This is the ultimate reality show. It's showing what there is in every way, not just visibly, right? But showing. And it's the way through as well. The way through to the revelation of ultimate reality. It's not a two-dimensional veil. It's everything. This infinitesimal point, of which there is only one, is the most powerful singularity of absolutely everything. That everything is shining out of, but it is the light that you are. You are ultimately this light, the light of being, the light of the highest self, the deepest self. So anyway, there are these two things, and then this third thing is the ultimate reality show. So this is pretty deep stuff. I mean, there are many levels, layers to all of this, and I will organize it just like other people. In fact, the only other one I've found who really does this well, besides like all the philosophers whose shoulders I stand on, the philosophers who I'll reference, like, hey, what's up? Like Peter Manchester and George Spencer Brown. You know, you can throw Sri Krishna in there, but
He's yours, brother?
No, I don't know who's other. So there's like these philosophers, right? But there's only one other like person doing this, what I'm attempting to do, and that's Leo Gura. And his videos on metaphysics and spirituality, enlightenment, he's really hitting it correctly, you know. Okay, but I decided to say something because what I've been working on all these years, this infinitesimal point and this systemless system, this metaphysical system, you know, I don't know, it is a system. I mean, it's a doctrineless doctrine, but it is a kind of doctrine. It's a kind of system. And, you know, no one else is doing that. So that's what I wanted to contribute. And another word for this system or doctrine or whatever is sphere theory, sfera, the doctrine of the infinite sphere. At the same time, you know, I could drop the sphere and it's all about the point. You just be really, really radical about the point, right? In every metaphorical sense, but also quite literally, absolutely, mathematically, geometrically, this point. So anyway, that's why I wanted to say this stuff today and try to, you know, begin force myself into beginning a video series about it, even though I'm still working on the Holy Bible, which which is me. I am the literary incarnation of the Holy Bible, so I can spit that shit. So there's the Holy Bible, there's the Ultimate Reality Show, and these, when I go deep in my meditations, I find these are the way to express this stuff. These are the platforms of revelation. So, that's about enough for today. Be well.